Chapter 31 The dangers of complacency. 1 month had passed since Circex went with the other leaders of the three factions alliance to Asgard, and in that time, no one could tell Rheus why her brother hadn't returned. The army that had gone with him had already come back. They had reported to her father that Circex, Seraphol, Azazel, Shemazai, Michael, and Gabrielle had been transported to Asgard without them. The army had waited for nearly a whole week before returning to heaven and the underworld. Sitting in her office, Rheus worked diligently on her paperwork. With Circex gone, a lot of his work had been sent her way, though Graphia was also handling some of it as well. Even so, her workload had nearly tripled. Amau had a lot more work than Amir Kane, even one who belonged to a clan from the 72 Pillars. She paused halfway through one stack of documents, rubbed her eyes, and then leaned back in her seat, shoulders slumping as though she was carrying the weight of the world on them. It certainly felt like there was a world on her shoulders. A knock on the door echoed before it opened and Akano walked in with a smile. She was pushing a tray in front of her, which had tea and scones. "Good morning, bucko." Akano greeted with a smile that was far more genuine than the one she used to show. "Pulling another all-nighter?" "Akano." Rheus returned the smile with a tired one of her own. "Yes. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Sadly, I've not much time to do it." "Are you sure it's just that? What are you implying? That you aren't sleeping because you're too worried about your brother?" Rheus sighed. "I am worried. However, you don't need to worry about that. Naruto comes in and makes sure I get some sleep." Every night when she pulled an all-nighter, he came in and forced her onto the bed, then gave her a back and foot massage until she fell asleep. He'd done the same last night, and the night before that. She'd woken up early this morning with him still in bed. Naruto wasn't there anymore because he'd gone to train, but he would definitely come back in an hour or two in order to force her out of the office. "That's good. Your boyfriend seems to have a handle on how to deal with you." HMPH, Akano set a cup filled with black tea and cinnamon on the desk, then grabbed a plate, filled it with scones, and put that on the desk. "Make sure you eat your fill. If you're going to work on minimum, then you need another form of sustenance." "I will," Rheus promised. After putting Rheus's breakfast on the desk, Akano pushed the tray to the side, and moved to stand behind her as she continued to work. While she wrote something in a report, she grabbed a scone. She paused after taking a bite out of it. "This is delicious. Ufufufu." It was made by Ravel and Irina. They've apparently started cooking together, since they both like to bake so much. "I didn't know they were baking together." "That's because you've been cooped up in your office." Rheus said nothing to that. It wasn't long before she was interrupted again. There was a knock at the door. Rheus, thinking it was Kiba or maybe Irina, granted them permission to enter. She never expected to see the people who walked in. It was Metatron and Barakiel, Akino's estranged father, who entered her office. Akano stiffened as the two walked in. Rheus remained calm as both Angel and Fallen stood in front of her desk and offered a polite bow. "Metatron. Barakiel. It's been quite a while since I've seen either of you." Rheus paused, making it appear like she was gathering her thoughts, but she was actually using it as a minor stalling tactic to prepare herself. "To what do I owe the honor of your visit?" "I don't know how else to say this," Barakiel began in a gruff voice, "so I'm just going to come out and say it." He took a deep breath. "Yesterday evening, we received a report that Circex and the other three faction leaders who went to Asgard with him are attacking the Greek pantheon." "What?" Rheus didn't think she had heard right. Out of all the things that could have been said, this was simply the most unbelievable. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Barakiel gave her a pained grimace. "We're not exactly sure what's going on ourselves, but they launched an attack on Mount Olympus just yesterday. They were repelled, but we're now facing a serious crisis. The Greek gods are demanding an explanation from us," Metatron added, for once serious, for once not going on about ninja. "Unfortunately, we don't have any explanation that we can give. We assume that all of the people who went to Asgard have somehow been placed under the control of Loki, but we have no idea how to explain this in a way that won't make it seem like we're making excuses." Rheus felt Akino's hand come to rest on her shoulder, but that did little to settle her nerves. Her brother and the others had attacked another pantheon. Not only that, but they had attacked the Greek pantheon, one of the oldest surviving pantheons in the world. The three factions didn't have the strength they used to possess. Even with people like Circex and Michael on their side, their faction was far from strong. They didn't have the numbers, lacked the resources, and the one god in their faction was dead. In short, attacking another pantheon, especially one of the strongest, was a surefire recipe for self-annihilation. She knew that her brother and the others were not doing this on their own initiative. They were more than likely being controlled by those strange devices that Loki had been using. Rias never imagined that her brother could be controlled by such a thing. However, perhaps it was not a matter of strength. Maybe those devices used some means that even the most powerful of beings could not protect themselves against. "This is definitely Loki's doing," she said. "That goes without saying," Barakiel said. "The problem is that we're now in a bind. The Greek gods have given us an ultimatum. Either we kill Circex and the others ourselves, or they'll destroy our faction." "What? No." Rias stood up from her seat and slammed her hands on the desk. A loud thud echoed across the room, but her focus was on the two in front of her. "We can't, my brother, and the others, they." Barakiel looked away while Metatron sighed. "We don't like either of those options ourselves, however, we may not have a choice. We're going to try and find some way to save them. We can't really afford to let our leaders die, but we might not have a choice." "Metatron and I were told not to say anything to you," Barakiel told her. "However, we believe you have the right to know what's happening. We're going to inform Sona Citri as well." Rias wanted to scream, she wanted to cry, she wanted to do a lot of things, yell and break her desk. She did none of that. A king could not afford to lose composure. She took a deep breath and projected an aura of confidence that she didn't feel. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." "You're welcome," Barakiel said softly. "I wish we had more to offer you," Metatron added. Barakiel and Metatron soon left, and as the door shut behind them, Rias closed her eyes and tried to think. Sadly, her thoughts were in disarray. Her mind was scattered, particles of sand blowing everywhere, twisting and obscuring her vision, or rather, clouding her ability to think. She couldn't find a solution, an idea on what she should be doing, while in this state. "Go talk to him," she said suddenly. "Excuse me?" asked Akeno. "I know you wish to speak with your father," Rias said. "Go talk to him." Akeno hesitated for a second, and then hurried out of the room. Rias remained there for several more seconds. She watched the door that Akeno had left through. Then she stood up and hurried out of the room as well. She needed Naruto. Devil Ninja. Ever since the catnip incident, Kaneko had been insatiable. More than ever, she sought Naruto's affection in a more physical sense, a more intimate sense. It wasn't just Naruto either. Rias had also been subjected to Kaneko's lust, which seemed to disregard genders completely. Revel had almost been a recipient, but Naruto had stopped Kaneko, knowing that Revel wasn't interested in any Yuri action. Rias had theorized that it was because she was a Nekusho, devil hybrid. The effects of the catnip were essentially magnified several-fold, so even though most of it had worn off, some part still remained. It was unknown how long it would take for the catnip to fully leave her, or if maybe the side effect was a permanent change. Naruto and Rias had been helping Kaneko take the edge off. Basically, they had her join them in bed. Kaneko hadn't had sex yet, however, he and Rias had done any number of other activities. When Naruto had asked Rias why she was helping, her answer had been, "Kaneko isn't just my rook. She's my family, one of my sisters, and someone I love dearly. She is also an indispensable part of our relationship. Did you really think I would let you help her all by yourself?" So while Naruto was the most involved with satiating Kaneko's newly awakened sexual appetite, Rias also took part in their activities from time to time. It was, oddly enough, one of the few activities that could currently get Rias to stop working. She wasn't there right now, though. Naruto and Kaneko were in the hot spring after training with Irina and Kiba that morning. Revel normally joined them, but she'd been conspicuously absent. Steam rose all around them, clinging to their skin, mixing with their sweat. The heady scent of minerals was combined with their own unique scents. A unique smell that belonged solely to Kaneko was accompanied by a variety of noises. Kaneko's gasps, meows, purrs, and moans. Kaneko sat on the lip of the hot spring, her thighs resting on Naruto's shoulder, feet locked together behind his head at the heels. She was using one hand groped her breasts, pinching and tweaking her nipples. The other hand was on Naruto's head, pulling him further between her legs. Her cat ears were twitching sporadically as she shook her head back and forth. "Naruto. Naruto. I'm so close," Kaneko only called him, Naruto. when her lust had consumed her. It was a strange tic, but he thought it rather adorable. It was also a surprising turn-on. Who knew having someone call his name in cat speak could be so hot? Like a man dying of thirst, Naruto lapped at her lips, teasing her entrance and swirling his tongue over her clit. Her legs had already tightened to the point where a normal human's head would have been crushed. Good thing he was a devil. Even so, it still hurt. Her scent was incredibly intoxicating. It invaded his nose. It was not an unpleasant smell. He enjoyed her scent and taste. The amusing thought that he was dining on Kaneko almost made him snort as he ate the girl out. Kaneko fell backwards onto the tiles, her back arching, head thrashing as she cried out his name over and over again. Hearing her continuously call out his name made him more aroused than he thought possible. He wished her body was mature enough for sex. They'd have already done the deed if it was. Naruto kept a steady grip on her thighs. He loved the way her muscles bunched underneath his touch. They coiled, strong and powerful, yet trembled and shook at the same time. The softness of her skin combined with the hardness of her muscles created a strong but satisfying dichotomy. Naruto, I'm coming. For several seconds, every muscle in Kaneko's body became unbelievable tight. Her legs strengthened their grip on his head, to the point where it actually hurt, and then, all at once, Kaneko went completely slack. Her legs fell limp, her body became like a wet noodle, and when Naruto lifted his head, it was to find Kaneko staring listlessly at the ceiling. He grinned. Feeling better? Ha, ha, Kaneko's heavy panting filled his ears. Naruto, I love you. Naruto chuckled. After getting clean in the hot spring, Naruto and Kaneko dressed and went their separate ways. Kaneko was probably going to find Revel and Ophis. She usually spent her time with them, though he was sure that Revel was currently baking something with Irina. They had taken over cooking breakfast most mornings. Naruto went into his room. As he shut the door behind him, he heard a rustling noise. He looked over toward the bed. It was Rias. She had been sitting on the bed, though she was now standing. Rias, he asked. She didn't answer him, not verbally. Naruto was stunned when Rias tackled him, knocking him into the door with a harsh crack. He winced as pain entered his skull. In most cases, this would have been the moment where he asked Rias why she had just slammed his head into the door, but he didn't. Rias was crying. Her sobs were muffled, and her tears were staining his shirt. Naruto did what any man, no, any person, would do in this situation. He held her in his arms. It took a while for Rias to calm down, but she did eventually, though she continued holding him tightly. Feeling better? A little. Sorry for jumping you like that. It's fine, though now I'm curious to know what made you this way. Want to fill me in? Rias sniffled, nodded, and then backed away from him. She took his hand and led him to the bed. Once they were sitting, she explained the situation to him. She told him about how Searsex and the other 3 faction leaders that went to Asgard had attacked Mount Olympus, how the Olympians were demanding that they either kill Searsex and the others or risk annihilation, and how Barakiel had said they might not have a choice but to do as the Greeks asked. Naruto listened to all this with a silent calm. You didn't tell me all this because you want my opinion or sympathy, Naruto said at last. I know you. What's the plan? Nose still red, eyes still runny. Rias gave him a grim smile nonetheless. It was the kind of smile that was filled with determination. However, it had hints of defeatism, probably because whatever her plan entailed could end in everyone being killed or something similar. We're going to save them, she began, but we can't do it alone. We need help. Then, that's right. Rias nodded and took a deep breath. We're going to ask all of the people who fought in the raiding games for their aid. Devil Ninja, with Rias' decision made, there was nothing for Naruto to consider. Not only could he not stop her if he wanted to, but he didn't want to, not when the matter involved the lives of 6 leaders of the 3 factions alliance. However, gathering allies was not the easiest of tasks. There was Sona and her peerage, of course, and all it took for Rias to convince them to join her was letting Sona know what their plan was. However, the others would not only be more difficult to convince, they were tougher to reach. 3 of them were in heaven. Devils could not reach heaven. Unless they had a death wish. The divine powers that infused heaven would kill even an ultimate-class devil. The person that Rias went to see was Cyroorg Biel, the one given the title of the strongest youth. If they were going to mount a rescue operation, then they would need the most powerful of their generation. That meant adding Cyroorg, who was definitely among the top contenders for most powerful, and his peerage, to the team. Taking a trip to the underworld was no simple matter. Rias had to pull many strings to get passage to the underworld. And then they went straight from her estate to the Bael clan's estate without pausing even a minute to rest. Cyroorg was already aware of their impending arrival. Someone would be receiving them when they got off the train. The train they were taking was the same one they had used to get to the underworld the first time around. Naruto was sitting on a couch by a large glass panel, looking out over the world while stroking Ria's hair as she lay on the same couch with her head on his lap. That was normally Kaniko's or Office's spot, but they had conceded it to Rias. So kind of them. Anyway, running his fingers through her hair was calming, and it seemed to help her remain calm, so it was a win-win situation. Asia and Issei, who were sitting on a couch immediately opposite them, were also looking out the window. "When do you think we'll be in Bael clan grounds?" asked Asia. "I believe we just passed the border a few minutes ago," Akeno said as she came up beside them. "The Bael clan doesn't have as much land as the Grimoire clan," Rias added. Her eyes were still closed as she remained where she was, leaning into Naruto's hand as he continued stroking her hair. "But that's because they're a smaller clan. Since there are less members, and less of their members own a peerage, their lands are smaller because they don't need as much." "I guess that makes sense." Issei scratched his head. "I'll be honest, all this devil politics and stuff still has me confused as fuck." "You'll understand it eventually." Akeno smiled. "Especially if you want to have your own peerage." A little ways off from where they were sitting, Kaniko and Gasper were playing a game of cards at a round table. Kaniko held a hand over one of Gasper's cards, watched as his expression fell, then switched to another card and watched as his face lit up. She went back to the other card and took it, grinning triumphantly when Gasper tears started leaking from the eye holes of his paper bag. Meanwhile, Kiba was polishing his blade. Only the Grimoire peerage was there right now. Office was getting in contact with Team Valley. Irina had gone back to heaven to ask Angelus, Israel, and Rule for help. And Rainier was traveling to the Fallen Angels section of the underworld to request aid from Bor, Gomari, Lix Tetrax, and Mestama. Sona and Ravel were meeting with Zephyrdor and Seekvera respectively. With luck and some effort, they would be able to form a large group to rescue Sirzex and the others. The train pulled into a station, one that wasn't as large as the Grimoire clan's train station, and the Grimoire peerage exited the train. They were met by a small entourage. The people, a trio of butlers, took them to a carriage that would drive them to the Bael estate. Naruto had come to expect large estates from devil clans. That was probably why he was surprised when, instead of appearing before a large estate, they were taken to a small house. A really small house. It only consisted of a single story, and while it had more space than a traditional one-story house, it was nothing compared to the massive mansions that the Grimoire and Phoenix clans owned. Is this really the Bael clan estate?" asked Naruto. "No, it isn't," Rias said. "This is Cyroorg's personal home. He likes to live away from the Bael clan, since he and they don't get along very well." "Ah. Master Cyroorg is waiting for you all in here," one of the butlers said, opening a door and gesturing for them to enter. "Thank you," Rias said, walking past the group as though she was used to not being presented with opulence. Since Rias wasn't disconcerted by the lack of wealth, Naruto didn't let it bother him and followed Rias inside with the others. What he found was a basic hallway that led into a living room-kitchen combination. The floor of the living room was lowered into the ground, covered in white carpet, and looked like a gamer's paradise. There were a bunch of soft couches and bean bags littering the area. A large flat-screen TV sat embedded into the wall, and there were a number of video game consoles, including some of the next-generation consoles that Rias owned. All the members of Cyroorg's peerage were present, except for Regulus. They sat on the lounge chairs and beanbags. Coriana and Mestata were playing a fighting game of some sort, Street Fighters, it looked like. The others were either watching them or doing their own thing. However, when he and the others entered, everyone turned to look at them. "Rias," Cyroorg said, standing up from the armchair he'd been sitting in. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon after you returned to the human world." Rias smiled, though it was one without joy. "Cyroorg, I'd love to say that this is a social visit, but I think you know that's not the case." Cyroorg nodded. "Something has happened. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of unrest here in the underworld. I'm guessing you know what's going on." Probably more than you, but I don't know everything. Rias sighed. You might want to sit down. This explanation is going to take some time. Cyroorg listened as Rias explained what happened to her brother and the other 3 faction leaders. It wasn't just Cyroorg who listened. His whole peerage paid close attention to what was being said. And Regulus had returned from wherever he'd been when his king called him. Since Naruto had heard all this several times already, he focused more on the expressions of those hearing about it the first time. That's definitely a problem. Cyroorg leaned back and crossed his arms. Honestly, if you were anyone else, I'm not sure I'd believe you, but I know you aren't the type to joke when it comes to matters like this. We're planning to save them, but we need help, Rias confided, finally getting to the point of their visit. Cyroorg, will you help us? Cyroorg grinned in response to that question. Do you need to ask? Our leaders are in danger, and you are asking me to go on a dangerous mission that will show off the strength of myself and my peerage. Of course we'll help. That's great, Rias said, however, there is something I want. Rias paused. What's that? Cyroorg pointed at Naruto. I want to fight you, one-on-one. Shrugging, Naruto said, once we've rescued our leaders, I'll be more than happy to kick your ass. Barking with laughter, Cyroorg grinned fiercely. That's the kind of response I was looking for. There were a few more details that they needed to work out, so Rias spoke over the specifics with Cyroorg. What it basically came down to was this. They were going to put together a team, but they were waiting to hear back from Sona, Revel, Rainier, and Irina. When that happened, everyone would meet at their mansion in the human world, and they would hash out a plan to rescue the 3 faction alliance leaders. Naruto only paid a little attention to the conversation. It wasn't anything that he didn't already know, so he spent more time stroking Kaniko's cat ears. However, even touching Kaniko's lovely and soft cat ears couldn't stop him from worrying. The Gremory peerage eventually left after getting Cyroorg to promise that he and his peerage would meet them in the human world in 2 days' time. They had selected 2 days because it took at least 1 day to reach the human world without teleportation, which most people couldn't just use on a whim. Naruto had found out earlier that Riser teleporting himself into Rias's clubhouse had been met with a harsh scolding from his parents via Revel. As he sat on the train that would take them back to the Gremory estate, Naruto wondered how Revel was doing. He hoped she'd managed to convince that stubborn asshole Zephyrdoor to at least consider meeting with them. Devil Ninja, after everyone returned home, the girls convened in the large hot spring as a means of relaxing and bonding with their fellow females. Boys weren't allowed. Rias sat on a bench inside of the hot spring. She watched Kaniko play with Revel and Ophis for a while, but she wasn't really in the mood to enjoy their antics today. Exhaustion was seeping into her bones. Ever since she had learned about what was happening to her brother, what her brother and the other faction leaders had done under Loki's command, she'd been working non-stop on getting everything ready for a rescue operation. You look like you're thinking deep thoughts, a voice said in her ear. Sona, Rias greeted as the student council president of Kuo Academy sat down on her left. Her friend and rival retained a composed expression as she glanced at the members of their combined peerages, towel barely covering her modesty, but if one knew her as Rias did, they would know the signs of nervousness. Sona's left leg bounced up and down. Her eyes were slightly twitchy. Her right index finger was playing a staccato rhythm against her knee. Did your meeting with Sikvera not go well? Sona raised a hand as though to adjust her glasses, but then she seemed to remember that she had left them with her clothes. She lowered her hand and sighed. It went fine. Sikvera has agreed to meet with us. That's one less thing to worry about. Are you guys talking about how your meetings went? Asked Irina as she wandered up to them. That's right. Rias nodded as Irina sat down on her right. Speaking of, how did your meetings go? They were good. Irina chirped. Everyone agreed to meet us. They'll be here in 2 days. That was a load off Rias's shoulders. She'd been under the impression that the angels and the fallen would be the hardest to convince, but thanks to Irina and Rainier, everyone had agreed to at least meet them at this house in 2 days' time. Rias hoped that would give her enough time to create several strategies that she could propose. Of course, the ultimate strategy they came up with would be one that all of them agreed on. Even if everyone agreed with one she presented, it would likely be changed several times to suit individual tastes, but that was also why she was making several. If one of them didn't appeal to everyone, another might. Speaking of, I'll have to convene with Sona and Revel to create our strategies. Sona was her polar opposite when it came to creating strategies. Where Rias preferred bold strategies that allowed her to face the enemy head-on, Sona liked using deception and misdirection, so she'd be able to point out any flaws in her plans. Ravel, on the other hand, seemed to have mastered the art of managing and convincing people. She still had no idea how the girl had convinced that hard-head Zephyrdor to meet with them. And her strategies were also impressive. She had been Riser's strategist. Were it not for Naruto being her wildcard, Rias might have lost that match. Steam rose all around them as Rias and the other girls of hers and Sona's peerage continued to relax. It would likely be the last time they did this for a while. Devil Ninja, everyone was present. The two devils, Seekvera and Zephyrdor, were standing near the back with their respective peerages. While Seekvera merely had a calm demeanor and seemed intent on observing the proceedings, Zephyrdor was glaring at Ravel like he wanted to burn a hole through her head. He wondered what that was all about. Angelus was standing next to Cyroorg, and while the youngest of her aces was looking hatefully at the strongest youth, Angelus seemed quite content in the powerful devil's presence. The other two angels sat scattered around the office. Israel sat on the couch, sipping the tea that Akano had so graciously provided. His peerage was gathered around him. Rule stood as far from the devils as possible. There was also Bor, Gomeri, Lix Tetrax, and Mestama. While Lix Tetrax was standing right up front, Bor and Mestama had chosen spots near the back. Gomeri was on the couch opposite Israel. Unlike the angels and devils, their peerages were not with them, since the Fallen did not have a true peerage system installed. Naruto stood behind Rias, on her left, the opposite side that Akano was standing. He could spot the Gremory peerage throughout the room. Asia and Issei were sitting with Rainier, who silently hovered over them like an overprotective mother. Kaneko was sitting on Irina's lap. Now that was a surprise. Thankfully, Irina didn't seem to mind. Gaspar was hidden in a corner. All these people were probably making him nervous. On the other hand, Kiba stood beside Lix Tetrax, who, Naruto noticed, was absently looking at the handsome blonde with interest. Outside of the Gremory peerage, Rossweiss was also present, though she remained unobtrusive, standing several meters from everyone else with her arms crossed. Ravel was next to Kaneko and Irina. Really, the only one he didn't see was. Something warm entered his hand. Naruto looked down at the hand that was now holding his, followed the hand up the arm, the slender shoulder, and onto the face of Ophis, slightly more mature, a little taller, and with bigger breasts. He didn't know what was going on with Ophis, but she had been changing her appearance slightly as the days went by. Sometimes she would be taller. Other times she would have larger breasts. The only thing that never changed was her face. Regardless of what change she made, she'd always come to him for his opinion. Naruto gave it, of course. He figured she was trying to find out what sort of appearance he liked the best, and he couldn't deny that he had his preferences. Rias was first in his heart. Her appearance was exactly what he loved, but it would be a lie to say that she was the only beauty who got his motor running. He wouldn't get such a serious hard-on for Kaneko and Ravel if that had been the case. Ophis was now slightly taller than Kaneko but shorter than Ravel. Her hair remained long and black, and her face hadn't changed from its lowly appearance. She'd also given herself bigger breasts. They were between Ravel and Kaneko, again, and they fit her well. She was difficult to look at in public because she was still wearing that black tape over her nipples and nothing else to cover them, but he figured it was just what she liked wearing. So long as he didn't look, he wouldn't get a boner. "Thank you all for coming," Rias said. "I know that everyone here is busy, so I'll get right to the point. 6 leaders of the 3 factions alliance went to Asgard over a month ago and were defeated, placed under Loki's control." "The fuck do you mean they were placed under Loki's control?" Zephyrdor was the first to speak. "I mean just that," Rias replied. "Loki somehow got his hands on a device that can control other people, regardless of their power, and he's using that device to control Circex, Michael, Azazel, Seraphal, Gabrielle, and Shemazai." "How is that even possible?" asked Angelus. "A device that controls people? I mean, no disrespect, but it seems impossible for something like that to exist." "The devices are powered by nature chakra." Naruto fielded this question. "I'm not sure what any of you know of nature chakra, but the basics is that it's the energy that permeates the world. This means that it's powered by the world's power, which is thousands of times stronger than any one angel, devil, or fallen angel. It wouldn't be that hard to control someone, even an ultimate class devil, with this power. This is also how Loki gained control of Asgard. Roswise suddenly spoke up. After Loki killed Odin and took control of Asgard, he forced these collars onto us, which put everyone under his direct control. We were still conscious of what we were doing, but we couldn't do anything to resist. Even our strongest Asgardians were helpless. Most of those living in Asgard were gods. Their powers were undeniable, and thanks to the strength of their pantheon, which was one of the strongest, they were even more powerful than most other gods and goddesses. The only people of Asgard who were not gods were the heroes and the Valkyries like Roswise. However, even they had strength that was on par with the gods. Rias had once put them near the top in terms of individual strength. She said they were stronger than most people in the three Christian factions. People like the Maus and Archangels being the exception. And that anyone Asgardian could defeat an entire army of devils on their own. That this device could control even gods was cause for alarm. You mentioned before that the leaders of the three factions alliance have been subdued by this device. Seekvera prodded Rias to continue. It's more problematic than that, Rias said. Circex, Seraphal, Michael, Gabriel, Azazel, and Shemazai attacked the Greek pantheon just 3 days ago. The Greek pantheon was hands down one of the most powerful pantheons. The power of faith, of belief, of the acknowledgement of their existence, was what gave a pantheon its strength. The more followers a pantheon had, the more people who believed in them, the stronger they became. However, it was also a matter of longevity. While Christianity had the most followers, the Greek pantheon was one of the oldest surviving religions, dating back to before the new calendar. What's more, there were numerous fictional stories and literature written about them. This gave the Greek pantheon more strength than even Christianity. It was said that their top three gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, had powers that were stronger than all of the three factions of the Bible. In other words, picking a fight with them was suicide. Are you sure that is what really happened? Asked Azrael, his eyes wide. Rias closed her eyes and nodded. This information comes from Metatron and Barakiel. We can trust it. I can't believe this has happened, Mestama muttered. All of our leaders are being controlled and attacking the Greek pantheon. It gets worse, Rias continued, her tone grim. The Greeks have given us an ultimatum. Either we kill the three factions' leaders, or they will declare war on us and eradicate all three factions. It was an understatement to say they were in a bad way. This was essentially a death sentence. Their leaders were the only thing keeping this alliance together, and without that alliance, they did not have the power to survive anymore. It was like asking them whether they preferred a slow death or a quick one. Before we begin to panic, I believe Rias has a plan, Cyroorg said just as everyone was about to start freaking out. He gestured to the redhead. Rias, I believe now is the time to unveil your plan to us. You are right, Rias said. I have several plans, of course. We'll select the one that has the best chance of succeeding and modify it to suit our strengths. Selecting a plan was a lot harder than it sounded. While everyone, even Zephyrdor, agreed that they needed to do something, it seemed as if no one could decide on what they should do. Someone always had something to say, some complaint to make. It only seemed to get worse as time went on. The more plans Rias proposed, the fewer people who sided with her, until they even started questioning her abilities as a king. Rias, to her credit, accepted their criticisms with aplomb, stating that while none of them were the most ideal plans, they were the only ones that had a chance of success. All of you need to be quiet. A shout suddenly interrupted all of the arguing. It was, surprisingly, Ravel who had done the shouting. What was that, Chibi? Zephyrdor glared at her. You wanna go? You picking a fight? If you'd like me to reveal what your hobby is to everyone here, I suggest you back off, Ravel said. HRK, as Zephyrdor paled and stopped talking, Ravel moved to the front of the office and turned to face everyone there. All of you are arguing about whether any of these plans will work, but none of you have even proposed a single plan of your own. Rias, Sona, and I carefully went through every plan we could think of and selected these ones because they have the highest possibility of working. They were made specifically to play to each of your strengths. Now, it's fine if you don't like any of them, but unless you have your own plan, I suggest each of you shut up and listen because right now you all sound like a bunch of idiots. Naruto was impressed with how Ravel put everyone in their place. Those gathered were so silent now that he could have heard a pin drop, and what's more, They didn't seem capable of even forming words. A few of them were just soundlessly moving their mouths, as if they wanted to say something but couldn't. Finally, I don't really have a problem with your plans, Cyroorg said. My only real concern is that the majority of these plans hinge on those two. He pointed at Naruto and Ophis, who were still holding hands. Revel looked back at them, glanced at Naruto, and then squeaked and looked away. Naruto sighed. It seemed she still couldn't look at him for some reason. He didn't know why, but she had been avoiding him for the past few days. She's been masturbating to you, Ophis said. Excuse me? Naruto asked. Revel. Ophis nodded at the girl with blonde drills. Every night, she's been masturbating while calling out your name. I think she's too embarrassed to face you. I did not know that. So that's what was happening. Well, he guessed it was good to know that the reason Revel couldn't look at him was because she was embarrassed about masturbating to him. But now came the question of what he should do about it. Should he confront her? Should he wait for her to come to him? Whatever he decided, he should make a decision today. They'd be leaving soon, and it was better to resolve matters like this while they still had the chance. Thank you for telling me, he said after a moment. Ophis nodded. After we rescue those faction leaders, you owe me a date. Naruto blinked, and then nodded. Okay. Sure, after we rescue Circex and the others, I'll go on a date with you. I'll hold you to that. While Naruto and Ophis were having their own conversation, Rias defended them. The reason we're relying on these two is because of their powers. Ophis is the Ouroboros dragon, the immortal dragon god. Out of all of us, she's the only one capable of taking out an entire pantheon by herself. Likewise, Naruto has a power sealed inside of him that is close to being on par with Ophis. We have no choice but to rely on that power. Okay. Point. Cyroorg looked at Naruto and frowned as though wondering if what Rias said was true. He probably didn't like the idea that Naruto was holding back his power. However, you're saying that they are going to take on the Asgardians and Greeks by themselves. Isn't that a little much, even for them? Rias shrugged. What do you want me to say? We can't afford to fight either Asgard or Greece. We'll need the majority of us to confront our own leaders and wrest those mind control devices off of them. All 6 of our leaders are strong enough to take 1, 2, or even 3 of us out with little effort. To beat them and force those devices off, we'll need to team up on them. I guess that's true. Cyroorg sighed. Alright. I concede your point. Does anyone else have anything they wish to say regarding this plan? Asked Rias. When no one spoke up, she nodded. Alright. Let's all sit down and determine how we're going to divide our forces. Devil Ninja. The meeting had ended and everyone decided to stay at the Gremory mansion. They would be leaving tomorrow, so it only made sense. Dinner had been a bit of a hassle. Naruto, Rias, and Irina had been forced to cook for everyone. Naruto had to create several clones to do some grocery shopping because they ran out of ingredients halfway through, but outside of that, it went well enough. It was later at night, and Revel was lying on her bed, feet pressed into the mattress, hips raised, and finger plunging relentlessly into her entrance. Naruto. Naruto. She cried out Naruto's name as she did everything she could to quench the fire burning in her loins. Being a phoenix, her arousal ran much hotter than other devils. Unlike the metaphorical fire she had read about in erotica, hers was an almost literal fire. Oh, Naruto, you feel so good inside of me, Naruto. Revel clenched her butt cheeks as she worked out the bundle of nerves and rubbed them furiously. Jolts of electric pleasure raced through her thighs shaking, breathing coming out in heady gasps. Revel rode out the wave of ecstasy that caused her mind to go white. She fell back onto the bed. In spite of having reached an orgasm, Revel found herself frowning. She raised her hand and looked at her fingers, soaked in her juices. Her fingers just weren't doing it for her anymore. She wanted Naruto plunging into her. She wanted to feel him stretching her out, to become one with him. However, Revel was too embarrassed to ask him to have sex with her. Ah, Naruto-sama and I are a couple. Why am I too embarrassed to ask him to sleep with me? I don't know, a voice said. Why won't you ask me to sleep with you? Revel froze as she suddenly became aware that there was a person standing on her ceiling. It was, of course, Naruto. Who else could it be? He was just standing there, on her ceiling like he was spitting in gravity's face, arms crossed and a single eyebrow raised. Wah! Revel's mind was screaming at her. She could feel her face growing redder by the second. He was, and her panties, and she was exposed. This was so humiliating. Wah, her mouth moved to form words, even though her mind was locked in terrorized embarrassment. At some point, however, her mind was able to overcome her issues. Her voice rang out like a megaphone. "WWW, what are you doing here? Why are you in my room?" She paused. Then, "How long have you been there?" "I think I got here just as you were close to climaxing," Naruto admitted. "Asshole." Revel threw a pillow at him. She would have blasted him with fire, but she didn't want to burn the mansion down. "Pervert. Lech. What were you thinking? You can't spy on a girl in her room." "Actually, I knocked several times, but you weren't answering," Naruto said as he swatted her pillow aside. "Furthermore, you've been avoiding me. So this was the only thing I could think of to make you talk to me." "I'm not going to talk to you now," Revel screamed. Then, suddenly, as if a switch had been flipped, she looked away, incapable of even looking into his eyes, and muttered, "And you saw me, in such an embarrassing state, too." Naruto dropped from the ceiling and crouched before her. Revel squeaked and bolted upright, moving backwards until her back hit the wall. It was probably good thing her bed rested against a wall or she'd have fallen off. Though perhaps that would have been better since Naruto had crawled onto the bed and was so close their faces were almost touching. "You know, Revel, you should tell me when you're feeling this way," Naruto whispered. I wanted to but, Revel, also whispering, let out a soft gasp when Naruto placed a hand on her cheek. The way he stroked her skin, so tenderly, made her feel like she was melting. "You're a part of my family, and when I gain my own peerage, you're going to become a member of it, right? That'll bring us even closer." Naruto leaned forward until their foreheads were pressed together. "Rias has also given you the okay. When you want something of me, just ask. It's as you say. We're a couple. You don't need to be embarrassed to ask me for anything." Anything?" Revel swallowed. Her mouth had gone dry. "Anything," Naruto confirmed. Then I want you to touch me," she muttered. Revel nearly panicked when Naruto slid the hand on her cheek down to her neck, but when he began rubbing his fingers into the stiff muscles around her neck and shoulders, her body unconsciously relaxed. Naruto soon left her neck. He moved his hand across her shoulder, down her arm, moving up and down until goosebumps had formed on her skin. Not there," Revel murmured. My more intimate places. Touch me there." "If that's what you want, Revel, you only need to ask." Revel shivered at Naruto's voice. Why did it sound so husky all of a sudden? All questions fled her mind when Naruto undid the bow that hung over her chest. As the fabric slid apart, he leaned down, grabbed the zipper that kept her jacket closed with his teeth, and pulled it down. He reached out with both hands, pulling her jacket apart and sliding it down her arms, until she was wearing just the white dress. "Scoot forward, please," Naruto said softly. He took her hands and pulled. Revel let him. She scooted along on her butt, her dress bunching up near her hips, until her feet hung off the edge of the bed. Thanks to her short stature, she was too short to reach the floor. Naruto, now on the ground, grabbed the hem of her dress and began lifting it over her head. It was already crumpled past her butt, so lifting it was easy. "Raise your arms," he said. Revel lifted her arms as Naruto continued raising the dress. She was keenly aware of every centimeter of exposed flesh that she was showing. Just knowing that he was seeing her like this was embarrassing, but at the same time, it was oddly satisfying. She felt content. Naruto was seeing her. He was the only man who would ever see her like this. A thought suddenly occurred to her. He might be the only man, but what about women? Kaneko had recently been getting sexually pleasured by both Naruto and Rias. Sometimes just Rias. She'd once accidentally spied Rias fingering Kaneko through a crack in the door when they hadn't been careful enough. Was that going to happen to her? The thought should have been repulsive, but all she could wonder about was, would Naruto like it? Her dress came off. Revel raised her arms to cover her bra as Naruto tossed the dress onto the floor. They didn't remain there. Naruto pulled them away from her chest. "Let me see you," he said. Revel, her face red, stuttered, "Do you like what you see?" "Of course, but I'd like to see more." She was given no chance to respond, for Naruto leaned forward and kissed her. Revel could do nothing but melt into the kiss. His lips were warm and soft. She felt her arousal spike as he gently nibbled on her lower lip. All the while, his hands were on her bra, deftly unhooking it, causing her chest to suddenly feel a lot less tight.
The bra came away, and Revel was left bare. She would have covered herself again, but Naruto, who continued to kiss her, pushed her onto the bed. She fell back.
Naruto leaned back up and pulled off his shirt. Revel had seen him with his shirt off before, so she was aware of how defined he was, but even so, the chiseled abs and powerfully built chest and shoulders never failed to make her yearn to touch them. "Revel," Naruto said suddenly. She perked up. "You're so beautiful." What are you?" Hampered once more by Naruto's mouth. Revel could do nothing but wrap her arms around him as a tongue suddenly penetrated her mouth. Warm. Wet. Naruto's tongue sent sensations through her like nothing else. He played with her tongue, swirling his around hers, hooking them together. Despite that, there was an underlying gentleness about his action. It was passionate, but, to her, it also felt loving. A hand soon landed on her right breast. Revel gasped into Naruto's mouth as fingers tweaked her nipple, which quickly stiffened into a point. The hand left, but it didn't matter, because another hand landed on her other breast and did the same thing. It felt so good. It was so amazing. Revel's moan was muffled by her lover. The hand once more left her breast, sliding along her stomach, tickling her skin, before reaching her white panties. It didn't slip under them. It went over them, gliding along the fabric, reaching her lips and pushing down. Revel's hips involuntarily bucked as Naruto ran his finger along her opening. The fabric of her panties were pushed into her, causing an unusual friction that felt like a static shock. As Revel gasped again, Naruto stopped kissing her mouth in favor of her neck. While licking, sucking, and kissing her neck, he finally slipped his hand into the waistband of her panties, found her entrance, and slid a finger inside. "Naruto-sama, I feel so hot, good. Time to make you burn even more." Ooh. Naruto was clearly more experienced than her. His fingers quickly made her entire body shudder with an orgasm. It came more quickly than she could imagine, but he wasn't done yet. Naruto brought his head to her breasts and took one of her nipples into his mouth. Revel screamed as he gently bit down. It raced through her nerves. Ecstasy. Her mind and body were being flooded with ecstasy. Her breasts and entrance were being assaulted. It felt amazing, mind-numbing. Revel thought she was seeing stars. There was no telling how many times she came, but she had definitely blacked out after her third or fourth orgasm. Naruto was no longer touching her. He was kneeling on the bed beside her when she finally came to. What happened?" she asked, voice slurred. "You passed out." "I did? How embarrassing, you did. But it wasn't for long." Naruto paused. "Do you want to continue?" Revel could feel the heat spreading through her body, but she mustered up her courage and nodded. "Yes, please." "Then please let me take care of you." Flashing her a quick grin, Naruto moved off the bed and knelt before her. Revel lifted herself on her hands to look down as Naruto grabbed her black stockings. They were the only articles she had left aside from her panties. He first grabbed the left one, slid it down her leg and off her foot, and then he did the same with the right. She thought he was going to take off her panties next. However, she became confused when he grabbed her right foot and began massaging her toes. What are you doing?" she asked, suddenly nervous. Her feet were tingling, like after rubbing her socks against the carpet. "Rias and I haven't tried this yet, but I've always been curious to see how it feels after watching anime," Naruto said, bringing her foot to his face. "You'll have to let me know what you think." She would have asked what he was talking about, but then Naruto sucked her big toe into his mouth. And Revel threw her head back as her toe was encased in a warm wetness. Amazing. It shouldn't have been possible, but somehow, as Naruto swirled his tongue around her toe, her mind blanked out as she experienced a different kind of pleasure. Naruto didn't just pleasure her big toe. He ran his mouth over all of her toes, sucking on each one, licking between them. It should have been dirty. Gross. She should have thought it was disgusting. But all she could focus on was how good it felt, especially when he ran his tongue along the soles of her feet. By the time Naruto was finished, a blushing Revel was lying on the bed, her forearms covering her red face as she bit her lip and tried not to cry out in pleasure. The bed shifted. Naruto must have sat on it, though she couldn't see him. "Thoughts?" he asked. "Why?" she mumbled. "Why does that feel so good?" "Not sure," Naruto said. "I saw it in a hentai that Rias asked me to watch with her." "Hentai? Nothing. Anyway, Revel," the tone of his voice made her bring her arms down.
You and I are a couple, but tonight, I would like to make you mine completely. Will you become mine?
Ravel thought she should have been blushing up a storm, but instead of being embarrassed, she wanted to cry tears of joy. Yes, that's what I want. I want to become yours. Naruto smiled as he moved off the bed again and grabbed her panties. They were soaking wet. As he peeled them off her hips, a wet sound issued from them, as though they were stuck to her lips. When he slid her panties over her feet, he tossed them to the floor. Ravel, already knowing what was going to happen, spread her legs apart so Naruto could move between them and line himself up. As he leaned down, Naruto teased her entrance, while pressing his forehead to hers and looking into her eyes. In return for becoming mine, I am now yours. He grinned and winked. Please be gentle. I'm the one who should be saying that, Ravel muttered. Naruto just kept grinning. When Naruto first entered her, it hurt. It was so unbelievably painful that Ravel cried at first. However, Naruto didn't move at all, allowing her to adjust, letting the pain fade. When he finally did begin moving, it was slowly so as not to hurt her now stretched muscles. It felt good. Ravel knew that sex was supposed to feel good, but she hadn't realized that it could feel this good. She now understood why her brother and his floozies were always fucking. Sex felt amazing. Naruto was a great lover. He seemed to know that she wanted slow and romantic over hot and passionate. His hips rocked against her and his lips sought hers in a loving kiss that made her toes curl. As he moved inside of her, as he kissed her, Naruto's hands sought hers, his fingers lacing with hers as heat slowly built up in her lower abdomen until she came. It wasn't just once either. Naruto held himself back until she had orgasmed at least twice more before letting himself go. She was a little disappointed that he pulled out, but he explained that, on the off chance that it could happen, he didn't want to risk her getting pregnant. I'd like to have kids, but not yet. Afterward, Ravel laid against Naruto's body, enjoying his warmth as he held her to him. She fell asleep as he stroked her hair. Devil Ninja. Every woke up early the next day. After eating a quick breakfast, the group, which had become massive enough that they had to hire a bus to drive them to the airport, boarded a private jet owned by the Gremory clan. Unfortunately, a private jet was not large enough to house over 40 people, much less the large number created by Rias, Sona, Cyroorg, Seekvera, Zephyrdor plus their peerages, and then Angelus, Israel, and Rule plus their brave saints. To that end, they ended up taking 2 private jets. Fortunately, the Gremory clan owned more than one jet. The flight from Japan to Greece took a total of 12 hours and 17 minutes. Their flight took them from Tokyo to Athens. They arrived at an airport, were offloaded and, after the second private jet set down, they boarded a large double-decker bus that Rias had somehow procured, which would take them to another mansion owned by the Gremory clan. I had no idea your clan owned holdings in countries besides Japan, Naruto muttered, staring out the window. The architecture in Greece was a lot different than in Japan. While the modern buildings were similar enough, interspersed throughout them were more ancient structures built using columns and large triangle-shaped roofs. There were also a number of buildings that looked like they had a hole or sunroof in the middle. Very different. Just because I chose to live in Japan doesn't mean that the Gremory clan only owns property in Japan, Rias said. She was sitting in the seat behind him since both his left and right were occupied by Kaneko and a very cuddly Ravel. Consequently, Ophis was sitting on his lap. It was a lot harder to deal with because she no longer looked like a child. Huh, I suppose I should have guessed that. Bucko lives in Japan because she's a weeaboo. WW what? I am not a weeaboo, Rias shouted, blushing beet red from the roots of her hair down to her neck. That's a very misguided term, Ravel said. It implies that Rias-sama thinks she's Japanese, but I'm pretty sure that Rias-sama is content being a devil. She just likes watching anime. That technically makes her an otaku. I'm not that either. Then, a Japanophile? No. Naruto would have chuckled at how Rias was being double-teamed by Kaneko and Ravel, unintentionally on Ravel's part though it was. But he couldn't because Ophis chose that moment to squirm against him. You have a boner, she said. Naruto blushed as Kaneko and Ravel turned to him. Now that she and he had finally had sex for the first time, she seemed a lot more confident, which explained why she immediately zeroed in on the spot between Ophis' thighs. I wish you wouldn't have said anything, he muttered as he realized that it wasn't just Kaneko and Ravel who were staring at him. Lix Tetrax, Angelus, and Cyroorg, who sat in front of him, and Issei, Asia, and Rainier, who sat on the seat opposite him, were also staring, as though she could see his erection. "Does having me sit on you in this form make you horny?" asked Ophis with a completely straight face. "Okay. I believe that's enough out of you. If so, then I guess that means this form is a success. After our date, we will have to experiment by engaging in intercourse."
Could you please stop talking? By the time they arrived at the Grimoire estate in Athens, which looked a lot like a Greek temple, Naruto and Rias were both thoroughly red in the face. He didn't know if that had been their intent. However, neither of them could look at anyone else for the longest time. It only became worse when the people who'd ridden in the other two buses that had ferried them through Athens asked about why they were blushing.
Naruto realized that it was a very good thing the Grimoire clan's mansions were so freaking huge. They wouldn't have been able to house so many people at the same time otherwise. Everyone was able to have their own separate room, should they choose it, though Naruto ended up getting a room with Rias, Kaneko, Revel, and Ophis. He thanked the ramen gods for the large bed. Dinner that night was prepared by a host of professional chefs, and it was traditional Greek cuisine. Naruto had never eaten Greek cuisine, so it was interesting to try out the host of different foods. He didn't know what half of this stuff was called. Some of it looked like pasta with a layer of melted cheese on top. There were these triangle-shaped bread thingies with more cheese stuffed inside of them. There was salads and meats and kebabs. All of it was delicious, and Naruto nearly ate himself into a coma. As the day wore down to a close, everyone went through one last briefing before retiring for bed. The flight had given everyone their jet lag, which not even angels, devils, or fallen angels seemed capable of resisting. Naruto was probably the only one still up. He had tried going to sleep, of course, but it was really hard when he's surrounded by 4 beautiful and naked women. Several thighs caressed his stiffy, and Kaneko had taken to licking him in her sleep. It got even worse when someone's hand wrapped around his shaft. Everyone was too tired to have sex. That meant Naruto was basically lying in bed with a boner that could cut through diamond. It was not a fun experience. That was why he decided to take a bath. Like every other bathhouse that the Grimoire clan owned, the one in this Athens mansion was massive to the point of being ridiculous. It looked like a traditional Greek bath from ancient times. Shaped like a square, several columns lined the bath, which had stone steps leading into it. There were a number of aqueducts from which hot water flowed like waterfalls. Naruto didn't know if they were there for a reason or aesthetics. As he was lounging in the pool, for he couldn't call it a bath, someone else walked in. He heard their footsteps before they appeared. It was Irina. Clad in nothing but a towel, the girl with golden brown hair stepped into the room. She stopped upon seeing him. "And Naruto," she squeaked before, quite suddenly, looking down at herself. It was interesting to see her realize that she was naked, shriek, and then crouch down to cover herself. "Irina." Naruto was a lot more calm. "Couldn't sleep either?" No," Irina admitted, still covering herself. "Would you like me to get out?" asked Naruto. Irina shook her head. "Why, you were here first. I'll get out." "You don't have to," Naruto said. "Since you're already here, why don't you join me?" Irina hesitated. "If it helps, I'll close my eyes." "Oh, no, that's okay." Slowly standing up, Irina wandered into the pool, sitting down about half a meter from him. "I trust you not to, look." Naruto smiled, though he didn't turn his head. He didn't want to make Irina uncomfortable. "Are you worried about what's going to happen?" he asked. "Why, yes," Irina admitted. "There's just no telling how this is going to turn out. Our strongest leaders are being controlled, and we're being expected to fight them and free them from that control. I'm afraid all of us will be killed before we can even get close to accomplishing our goals. That's a valid concern. Also, I'm being forced to fight Michael-sama." Naruto heard a loud clap, which he guessed was Irina clasping her hands together. "Oh, Michael-sama. What sort of cruel fate is forcing me to fight you? Is this a test from God? Is it?" Naruto chuckled. "I'm sure everything will turn out fine. If nothing else, you won't be fighting alone. You got a lot of people backing you up."
Irina calmed down. "I'm surprised you're not nervous. We might be going up against our own leaders, but you're going to be facing an entire pantheon alone. How are you not frightened by that?" "That's a good question," Naruto said. "I guess it's because I know that I'm fighting for a cause greater than myself. In order to keep this peaceful life of mine, I need to fight, and I need to win." Of course, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared, but being scared isn't going to stop me from kicking ass and protecting the people I love. Rather, it's because I'm protecting the people I love that I plan to kick so much ass.
Irina giggled, probably at his profanity. Protecting the people you love, huh? Sounds nice. She paused. Am I one of those people you love? What are you talking about? Naruto finally turned to Irina and gave the girl his biggest, brightest grin. Of course you are. I love you very much. Irina croaked before, with a squeak similar to that of a mouse. She turned away. DDD, don't look this way, Naruto. You can see everything. As Irina panicked and turned into a blushing, stuttering mess, Naruto laughed uproariously like a madman. Who knew that seeing Irina blush like this could be so therapeutic? Chapter 32 Pantheon Battles. The next morning was the big one. After a large breakfast, everyone moved out. Rias and the others, that being everyone who wasn't Naruto and Ophis, were traveling to Mount Olympus. Their job was to wait for the three faction alliance leaders, head them off before they could attack Mount Olympus, and defeat them by using their overwhelming numerical advantage.
There were 6 faction leaders being controlled. Rias and her peerage minus Naruto made 8 people.
They, along with Irina, Rainier, Revel, and Rossweiss to make 12, were going up against Searsex. Likewise, the other peerages and brave saints were going to take on one of the 3 factions' leaders. Sona and her peerage were taking on Serafal. Cyroorg was fighting against Michael with his peerage. Seekvera would fight Azazel, Azrael and Angelus were up against Gabrielle, and Zephyrdoor was going to fight against Shemazai. The 4 fallen angels, Gomeri, Lix Tetrax, Bor, and Mestama would join Zephyrdoor in fighting their leader.
Naruto and Ophis were already gone, having left together earlier that morning. Their job was different. Naruto was going to deter Olympus should they decide to get in the way. Ophis was going to kill Loki.
Mount Olympus was the highest mountain in Greece. Located close to an inlet in the Aegean Sea, the closest city to Mount Olympus was Larissa. The mountain was surrounded by several small villages. Unlike Athens, which was a combination of modern and ancient architecture, these villages appeared far older, with architecture that looked like it belonged in the early 1900s. Rias and the others had chosen to remain at the Olympus Ski Center, which, much to the dismay of all the devils minus Cyroorg and his peerage, was just a rundown hut made of bricks and had a thatched red roof. At least the inside had couches, carpet, and a fireplace. However, in all regards, the place they were staking out was threadbare enough that no devil would willingly put up with it unless they had no choice. I can't believe we're staying in a place like this, Zephyrdoor complained. This place doesn't even have a fucking espresso machine. And I'm cold. Where's the heater? Stop complaining, Seekvera grumbled, holding a cup of steaming warm tea that Akano had made for them. We're all miserable. The last thing we need is to hear you bitching. Che, shut the fuck up, you cunt. You're the one who needs to shut up. This back and forth continued for some time, with the fallen angels watching the duo as they took bets on whether or not it would come to blows. The pairs' peerages didn't help either. They actually began taking bets with the fallen angels. Fortunately, before it actually could come to blows, Cyroorg stopped the two from continuing. I know how you two feel, but we should be focusing on preparing ourselves for battle. We'll be fighting against the strongest people in our faction. We can't afford to waste energy arguing here. I know that, Zephyrdoor muttered as he turned his head. My apologies, Bael Sama, Seekvera said, cheeks lighting up. I spoke out of turn. It's all right. Let's just do our best to remain calm. A storm is coming, and I'd rather go into it with a clear head. Cyroorg walked back to Angelus, who smiled at him as he crossed his arms and sighed. You're very charismatic. Huh? You think so? Angelus nodded. Yes. I'm always impressed by how you can stop fights so easily. Aha. Thank you. Cyroorg scratched the back of his head. The young boy next to Angelus, who always hovered around her, was grinding his teeth.
Revel took all this in with a seemingly calm gaze. However, while she presented a calm exterior, inside she was anything but. Her mind was a raging maelstrom of worry.
She sat beside Kaneko, Irina, Rossweiss, and Rias. The other members of the Gremory peerage were scattered around the building.
Asia and Issei were with Rainier and Akano. The fallen angel was poking fun of Akano about something, who was responding with adequate sarcasm, though Revel couldn't hear what was being said. Gasper was hiding behind Kiba. It seemed he was using the pretty boy as a shield, while said pretty boy spoke with Tsubaki, Sona's queen. While Rossweiss discussed magical theory with Rias, Irina and Kaneko remained mostly unobtrusive.
Want some? Kaneko suddenly asked, holding out a bar of some kind of milk candy to Revel. Oh, thank you, Revel murmured, taking the candy and nibbling on it.
You're nervous. It wasn't a question. We're using one of the plans that I came up with, so I'm confident that it's the best plan we have, Revel began. However, we're going up against 6 of the most powerful leaders in our alliance. Some of them have the strength of an ultimate class super devil. Even though my plan is sound, the fact remains that it might not matter in the end. She was particularly worried about their upcoming battle with Searsex. As an ultimate class super devil, Searsex's powers made him one of the strongest beings in the entire world. Against someone like that, her plans might amount to nothing, for how could a plan work when it involved going up against someone who could destroy that plan simply by opposing them with overwhelming force?
Don't worry too much, Rias said, stopping her conversation with Rossweiss to reassure Revel. Your plan is a solid one. Even if it doesn't work out perfectly, I'm sure we can succeed so long as you keep watch and direct us accordingly. Revel's role in this fight was lead strategist. She was not going to fight. She was going to watch the fight and advise the others according to changes in the battlefield.
The biggest problem I can see is whether or not everyone will be able to hold off Searsex long enough for my plan to work. Revel bit her lip. Provided Eyes has enough time, he should be able to boost your power with his sacred gear high enough that you can theoretically take your brother on in a straight-up fight, at least, long enough to destroy the device that's controlling him. Once Searsex is no longer under control, freeing the others shouldn't prove as difficult.
The plan that Revel had concocted was simple. Rias Gremory and Issei Hyodo would stay behind the fighting lines, while everyone else fought against Searsex. They would hold off the current Lucifer, essentially providing a distraction for Issei and Rias, who would use the boosted gear's ability to double someone's power every 10 seconds to increase Rias's power, until she was strong enough to fight Searsex herself. After that, the others would clear out. Rias would move in, and free her brother from Loki's control. It was a very basic plan, one that could be adapted on a whim to adjust for variables in the fight, and with Revel providing tactical support, there was a chance for their victory. However, that chance was still low. If Revel had to estimate what their chances for victory were, she would say they had a 1/500th shot at winning. The problem wasn't necessarily the plan either. Searsex was just that powerful. That's why you're our strategist, Rias said. We all know how strong my brother is. As an ultimate class super devil, his powers are on a level of their own. I think everyone here understands that our chances for victory are low. However, they aren't zero, and if they aren't zero, then it means there is still a chance. Rias placed her hands on Revel's shoulders. We'll take that chance and win. I have confidence in your tactical abilities to make it so. Revel was stunned at the amount of faith Rias had in her, but she was also happy. Her brother had always relied on her for tactical advice. However, Riser had never really placed faith in her before. He had just used her, and then ignored her after a raiding game was won. Rias was stating, unequivocally, that she had faith in Revel's abilities. Wiping her eyes, Revel gave Rias her best smile. Yes, I won't let you down. Rias returned her smile. I know you won't. Before anything else could be said, the warm moment between them was ruined when, without warning, a massive shockwave slammed into the Olympic ski center. Shouts rang through the air as the roof was ripped off by incredible force winds. Several of the people inside were also lifted off the ground and would have gone flying were it not for Saji using his sacred gear to keep everyone from shooting off. Revel screamed as her ears were assaulted by the intense sound. She covered them in the hopes of lessening the pain, but it did little to help. It hurt. Blood was leaking from her ears, warm and wet, running down her neck. She couldn't even hear anything anymore. It was as if all sound had been muffled. When the shockwave finally ended, Revel realized that she and Kaneko were being hugged tightly by Rias, who had projected a shield to protect them from the worst of it. Several other people had also created a shield. Rossweiss was protecting Irina. Cyraorg was doing the same with his Peerage and Angelus and her brave saints. Issei had protected Asia, Akano, and Rainier with an ability she didn't know he had. Meanwhile, several members of Seekvira's Peerage were helping protect the others. It looks like the battle has started, Rias murmured before speaking to everyone in a loud, commanding voice. This is where it begins. Everyone, get ready. Once Naruto launches his assault on the Greek pantheon, we'll begin our attack and wrest our leaders from the control of Loki. Devil Ninja, Naruto floated above the battlefield, looking down with his arms crossed as the dimension that separated Mount Olympus. The real Mount Olympus, from the human world shattered under the might of Xerxes in his true form. Already, the gods and goddesses of the Greek pantheon were pouring down from their homes. He didn't know any of them. He didn't need to. His job in all this was simple. Fight the Greeks and keep them from destroying Xerxes and the other leaders. Rias, her peerage, and everyone else was already on their way to the battlefield. They were nothing but tiny specks to his eyes. He estimated that they would reach the war zone in about 2 minutes. That should be plenty of time. Are you ready, Kurama? Yes. Then let's do this. Naruto had been training hard to control Kurama's immense power. It was difficult because Kurama now had a nearly infinite amount of power, but he had picked up a secret to controlling it. Sage Mode. Sage Mode was the act of gathering nature chakra to strengthen the body and chakra.
Naruto had discovered that the issue wasn't mind over matter, so much as his body and chakra simply couldn't handle the pressure created by Kurama's chakra. It was trying to fill a glass with water using a fire hydrant. The power was simply so immense, flowed so quickly and was so powerful, that it caused cracks to appear, thus causing the power to leak out instead of remaining inside of him. Sage Mode fixed that. Naruto closed his eyes, held his hands together in a basic hand seal, and gathered nature chakra. Since they were near Mount Olympus, a land not only lush in nature but also filled with the power leaked from the gods of Olympus, gathering the energy was a trifle matter. He quickly entered Sage Mode.
Now, maintaining his calm, Naruto kept a tight leash on his Sage Mode as Kurama's power flooded his body. He felt the transformation occurring. It was more complete than the previous times they had done this. The cloak appeared around him. His clothing turned black while golden lines appeared along the fabric, and the 2 bangs on either side of his head stood up like a pair of ears. What's more, 13 truth-seeking balls appeared behind him. Naruto wondered about the number, which was more than his usual 9, but he dismissed them. His transformation had been successful. He'd also successfully kept himself from accidentally destroying any mountains, which was good. Even so, the power that he was unleashing had caused the battle between the Greek pantheon and the 3 faction alliance leaders to stop. With eyes enhanced by the power flowing through him, he could see the gods, goddesses, and faction leaders staring in his direction. He grinned and slammed his right fist into his left palm. A shockwave, small but strong, ripped through the air. Time to get this party started. Let's go, Naruto. Right. Naruto did not hesitate. Creating a sonic boom that echoed behind him, Naruto suddenly appeared immediately in front of the leader of the Greek gods. The only god who Naruto actually knew the same of, Zeus. The tall, blonde man's bronze eyes widened as he suddenly realized that Naruto was directly in front of him.
He was given no time to actually do anything, however, for Naruto slammed his fist into the lightning god's chest. As Zeus disappeared, the air around them exploding as the man was sent flying like a rocket on its way to the moon, Naruto twisted his body and kicked the god who'd been closest to Zeus. Naruto didn't know who he was, some guy with a beard, but that god was sent sailing toward the ground.
Naruto almost winced when the ground exploded after the god made impact with it. Like a tidal wave swelling from the sea, large chunks of earth erupted, flying into the air and spreading across the land, only to crash into the ground and cause more destruction. It was a good thing the nearest city was several dozen kilometers away, though it looked like Olympus National Park was going to take damage. Knowing that he couldn't hesitate, lest he give the gods of Olympus time to launch a counterattack, Naruto sent out his truth-seeking balls. Many of the gods scattered, though a few were knocked out of the sky. Keeping on the pressure, Naruto charged 2 Bijudamas in his palms and, taking aim at a pair of goddesses trying to get close to him, Naruto unleashed them. Bijudamas were made from a ratio of 8:2 positive black chakra and negative white chakra, shaped into a ball, condensed, and then fired. His father's Rasengan was modeled after them. The attack was usually fired from the mouth. However, Naruto didn't need to create one in his mouth. A Bijudama was also incredibly destructive, capable of annihilating entire mountain ranges with a single attack. Against a person, It was basically a one-hit kill shot. Against a god or goddess, they could survive it, but they'd definitely get injured, unless they were powerful. These two goddesses, a gorgeous older woman with vanilla hair and red eyes and a silver-haired beauty wielding a bow and arrows, proved that they were more than they appeared. The older woman slashed her left hand down. The Bijudama was split in half. The other one flew backward, releasing arrows more quickly than Naruto could keep track of, until the Bijudama eventually imploded on itself. Naruto thought it was a stupid move. The Bijudama was composed of condensed chakra, which meant that when it imploded, it didn't just suddenly vanish as though it had eaten itself. It reacted violently. A massive detonated spread out from where it had been, sending all of the gods who'd been in the area flying as though they'd been struck by Great Red's massive tail. Only two people remained where they were: Naruto and the older woman. "I recognize you," the woman said at last. "You're Naruto Uzumaki, a member of Rias Gremory's peerage." Naruto didn't let her know how shocked he was. "I had no idea that you knew who I was." The woman smirked. "I'm not surprised, since we haven't been introduced. I am Hera, the matron of the Greek pantheon. We do not normally pay attention to your kind, but ever since the angels, devils, and fallen angels formed an alliance, some of us have decided that you were worth watching. I saw the raiding games that were being held in the underworld. I also saw you destroy the entire Colosseum." Naruto blushed. "That wasn't on purpose. Perhaps not, but your power, in particular, has left many of us wary." As she spoke, several of the gods who'd been blown away came back and surrounded Naruto. Zeus, who had been launched who knew how far by Naruto's punch, also returned. There was a large bruise shaped like Naruto's knuckles on his chest. His face was also rather red and lightning skittered across his body. He seemed upset, though Naruto couldn't fathom why. "I'm guessing you're here to save your comrades who have attacked us," Hera continued. "Would you not do the same if our positions were reversed?" asked Naruto. "Searsex and the others are currently under the control of Loki thanks to a device he received that uses nature chakra to manipulate the minds of others. Apparently, the entirety of Asgard is also under Loki's control. My friends and I are here to free them. We don't actually have a quarrel with you. I just can't let you fight." Naruto tilted his head. "Won't you consider staying out of this?" "Do not make me laugh, boy," Zeus shouted, snarling. "Your alliance attacked Olympus. There's no way we're going to let your kind get away with this." "I assumed as much." He didn't really blame these people for being angry. Really, if he'd been the recipient of an unprovoked attack, he would have been in the same position as them. However, he hadn't been, and the people attacking them were his friends, who were under the control of a madman bent on causing the end of the world. So even though he understood where these people were coming from, he had no intention of just letting them do whatever they pleased. Raising his hand, Naruto gestured for all of the gods and goddesses now surrounding him to bring it. "If you want to get to Searsex and the others, then you'll have to go through me," he declared. "You can come one at a time or all at once. It won't stop me from kicking all your asses." Devil Ninja Revel did not partake in the battle when it started. She floated high above the battleground so as to better observe how all of the variables were interacting with each other. Rias's peerage as they fought, Searsex and his powers, Rosweiss, Irina, and Rainier, and any unknowns who might become embroiled in the conflict. Information in this battle would be key. Far below her, numerous battles were taking place, the clashes causing small starbursts and explosions and sonic booms that created fierce winds, which even she could feel from up there. Rias and her peerage had engaged Searsex, while the other angels, devils, and fallen angels had become embroiled in battles with their respective targets. Further away, Naruto was defending himself from all sides against an entire pantheon of Greek gods. She would be lying if she said she wasn't worried. However, her boyfriend seemed to be keeping the Greeks on their toes. Revel couldn't actually see Naruto. All she caught were flashes of light. It was as if he was teleporting all around the battlefield. Occasionally, one or more of the gods would get smacked away and go flying. Sometimes there were massive explosions, and every now and then, the ground beneath them was destroyed. Already several cracks and abrasions were appearing far below, creating canyons where Mount Olympus had once stood. She could see Rias and Issei floating far to the back, side by side. Issei had placed a hand on Rias's shoulder, the hand with the boosted gear, and he was using his boost ability to double Rias's power every 10 seconds. She didn't know how powerful Rias would need to become, but Ravel had determined that she would need at the very least, 5 minutes worth of being boosted to be a match for her brother. Kiba. Irina is having trouble. Provide backup. Akeno. Lay suppressive fire for Kiba. Keep Sears-Sama occupied. Kaneko. Go in from above. Hit him with a heel drop when he's not looking. Ravel narrowed her eyes as she watched the battle play out, directing the forces of the Gremory peerage combined with Roswise, Irina, and Rainier. She was doing her best to keep their side from being overwhelmed. The problem was that Sears was simply too powerful for normal devils to fight against. Kiba went in to defend for Irina, while Akeno sent lightning at Sears from below. The lightning was blocked. Kiba's sword was also destroyed when it came into contact with Sears' powers of destruction. Before he could pull back, Kiba's hand was likewise reduced to subatomic particles. As he screamed in shock and pain, Kaneko came in from above, descending like a missile on Sears' head. Her hand was blocked by his forearm, but her strength was such that he was launched toward the ground. They had maybe half a second's reprieve. Asia, heal Kiba. Gasper. Stop Sears-Sama's left hand. Rainier, use your light spears to distract him. It wasn't long before Sears flew back up to engage them again. Gasper used Forbidden Balor View to stop Sears' left hand from moving, though he couldn't do so for more than 0.2 seconds. It was enough. During that time, Rainier threw a light spear at Sears, which struck his back. No damage was done. Sears was too powerful for a weak angel like Rainier to hurt, but it did push him forward, which was all they needed right then. Akeno. Roswise. Akeno and Roswise stood side by side, hands out, palms pointed towards Sears. While Akeno generated a massive amount of lightning that surged from her fingertips, Roswise generated a lot of water, which combined with Akeno's lightning to create an intense beam of white energy that blasted Sears in the face. Or it should have. Ravel groaned when Sears merely raised his hand and swatted the attack as though it were a fly on the wall. The beam of condensed energy careened toward the ground. It struck, causing a massive explosion that rearranged a good portion of the landscape. Fierce winds struck Ravel, who shielded herself from it using her family's fire attribute to create a barrier. She couldn't afford to look away from this fight. Akeno and Roswise. Keep up the long-range bombardment. Move around to present a harder target. Kiba and Irina. Flank him. Kaneko and Rainier. Work with Gasper to create an opening for Kiba and Irina. Gasper continued to use Forbidden Balor View from a distance, even going so far as to activate his Balance Breaker to increase his power. It didn't do much, however. With Balance Breaker, he was able to slow Sears' reactions by a fraction of a second. Sometimes, a fraction of a second was all a person needed. Kaneko slammed into Sears first. She struck him in the face with both feet. A sonic boom echoed like a thunderclap as the Super Devil was sent flying. Right into Rainier, who stabbed at him with her light spear. The spear, sadly, didn't do anything, and Sears merely swiped his hand and used his powers of destruction to cut Rainier's arm off. Asia, heal her, while Rainier fell. Asia used her newly awakened ability to heal from a distance to restore Rainier's arm. It was a gruesome sight. Ravel was fortunate that she had grown used to violence thanks to participating in her brother's raiding games. While Asia healed Rainier, Kiba and Irina had double-teamed Sears. Kiba was using Ascalon, the holy sword that Michael had given to Issei. His own demonic holy sword, created by the sacred gear, Sword Birth, was not powerful enough to even scratch Sears, but that sword was another story. Meanwhile, Irina used Excalibur Mimic to attack. Sadly, Excalibur Mimic was only a small piece of the true Excalibur and therefore not very powerful. Sears didn't even get injured by it, and Irina was nearly killed when Sears rained his powers of destruction on her. Irina moved out of the way before dying, but the attack annihilated half of her face and a good portion of her left wing. Sears then turned on Kiba. But Ravel directed Roswise to activate a shield that adequately saved him, while Akeno sent more lightning at the current Lucifer to create a distraction. Asia, Irina needs you. As Asia began to heal Irina, Ravel bit her teeth in frustration. This battle had only gone on for 30 seconds, and they were already being pummeled. Those 5 minutes felt further away than ever. Devil Ninja. Cyraorg and his peerage were fighting against Michael. It had been determined that they would fight Michael because he was the second strongest among the 3 faction leaders. Fortunately, they only had to contend with Michael. It made things a lot easier. While Michael was said to wield powers akin to a super devil, was an expert in magic, and knew more light magic than most others, Cyraorg was confident that he and his peerage could keep this man occupied. Cyraorg did not inherit the Bael clan's powers of destruction like his cousin Rias had. To that end, he had trained his body to surpass every physical limit that most people, be they devil or human, placed on themselves. It was this physical strength that earned him the title of the strongest youth. His body was both extremely durable and incredibly powerful. He used those to his advantage in this fight. Cyraorg had already equipped Regulus, the Nemean lion that had been sealed inside of the Longinus Regulus Nemea. Not only was he already equipping it, but he was using Regulus's most powerful form, Regulus Ray Leather Rex Imperial Purpure. Otherwise known as Break Down the Beast. This technique gave him the power to match a Satan-class devil for a limited amount of time. Considering he was going up against the Archangel Michael, he thought it a prudent decision. A massive spear of light easily 10 times his height raced toward him, but Cyraorg roared like a beast and smashed his fist into the light spear. He gnashed his teeth together, strained his limbs, and then shattered the attack, which sent streaks of light in every direction. His fist was smoking. So even in this form, I'm still no match for Michael. It was obvious, but disappointing at the same time, though it also made him glad that he was not fighting Michael alone. Coriana created numerous spears of ice that she sent at Michael. They shattered when the Archangel created swords and cut them all down. But then Dandoma slammed a fist into Michael's backside, sending the Archangel soaring into the sky where Ladora, already transformed into a dragon, doused him in a whirlwind of fire. They knew better than to let him have a moment's rest. Baruka, riding on Altobaru, tried to hit Michael with his 2 lances. They were blocked by a pair of swords from Michael, who had dispersed the flames with a single swipe of his blades. However, this left him open to Liban, who used his sword in conjunction with ice magic to create a chilling cutting blade. While that attack also failed when Michael raised his other sword to block it, it gave Cyraorg the necessary time to prepare his attack. The ground exploding beneath his feet, Cyraorg threw himself into the air faster than human projectiles, reaching Michael in less than a second. He punched Michael with all the strength he possessed, only to grimace when a sword dug into his back. His attack had knocked Michael back, but not only had the Archangel blocked it, he'd retaliated with his other sword. Regulus, I'm all right, Master, focus on the battle. I know, his peerage was working in pairs. Liban worked in conjunction with Coriana, who used her own magic to boost his. While he couldn't get close to hurting Michael, his swords were now strong enough that they actually froze over the light swords that the Archangel was using. Before their foe had time to recover, Kusha, his queen, used her power of hold to create a portal that sucked up Michael's swords and sent them back at him. The bladed weapons didn't pierce him, but they knocked him into Ladora's twin spear attack. Cyraorg waited and watched, his eyes on the device attached to Michael's neck. All he needed to do was destroy that device. Gathering his power, Cyraorg breathed in, breathed out, waited until Mistita and Gandoma created an opening for him. Then he launched himself at Michael like a blitzkrieging tank. Michael created another spear, a huge one. But Cyraorg wasn't interested in spears. Gandama and Ladora whittled the attack down before Kusha sucked it into a portal that launched it back at Michael. As divine energy cascaded all over the place from the explosion, Mistita and Coriana created an opening for him by creating a barrier that protected him from damage, mostly. Soon he was through the attack. His armor, Regulus Nemea, was smoking from holy damage, and his face was burnt, but he was in the perfect position. Michael wasn't even a centimeter away. Cyraorg reached out and yanked the strange necklace-like device from the Archangel's neck. It was a good thing he'd done so. Cyraorg had reached his limit. Regulus transformed from armor back into a giant lion as Cyraorg crashed face first into the ground and rolled across the destroyed and craggy surface. He dug his hands into the dirt, scrabbling to keep himself from rolling, and though it took a while, he eventually stopped himself. Good thing, too. He was centimeters away from falling into a chasm. He blinked several times and strained his muscles to stand up. But Regulus Ray Leather Rex Imperial Purpure was a technique that did more than merely grant him strength. It exhausted him to the point where he could barely move. All he managed to do was roll himself onto his back. As he stared at the sky, several people landed beside him. Most of them were his peerage, however, Michael had also joined them, his eyes clear, lips turned into a sad smile. "I appreciate your help," Michael said gently. "You and your peerage fought bravely and saved my life." Cyraorg tried to open his mouth, but he was too tired to even do that. Regulus spoke for him. "It was no trouble, is what Master wants to say." Michael's smile seemed to say otherwise, but he made no comment. "Since you saved me, allow me to return the favor by aiding all of you in your task." He looked up at the battles still taking place around them. "I shall go and free my comrades from Loki's mind control." Cyraorg would have said thank you. He didn't, he still couldn't find the strength to open his mouth. "I appreciate your assistance, is what Master wants to tell you." Fortunately, he had a Nemean lion who could speak for him. It was almost creepy how Regulus could practically read his mind. Devil Ninja. Boost. Rias bit her lower lip as she struggled to keep herself from moving forward to confront Circex. It was hard. Her peerage was on the ropes, and she couldn't do a single thing about it, not yet. Not until she had enough power that confronting him had a chance of success. Boost. She didn't know how long they had been boosting her power, but it was easy to feel the difference, since every time Issei used the Dragon Emperor Gauntlet's ability, her powers doubled. Rias had been keeping count. Her powers had been boosted 27 times. What was 27 times 10? 270? So, they'd been at this for 270 seconds, which was close to the 5-minute mark that Revel had set. Boost. She watched the battle between her peerage and her brother. Kiba and Irina were doing their best to harass him with guerrilla tactics, while Akano and Roswise fired at him with long-range bombardment. Akano used primarily lightning, though she also used the divine lightning of her heritage, of Barakiel's heritage. Roswise was using a wide array of magic that Rias had only dreamed of before. Fire. Ice. Lightning. Wind. The elements were hers to command, and she commanded them with an enviable talent. While they kept Circex busy, Gasper used Forbidden Balor View to stall Circex from attacking while Kaneko landed a deft attack that knocked him away. Well, that was what they were trying to do, boost. Even as she watched, Kaneko's entire chest was caved in from a punch by her brother. She wanted to scream when the Nekosho was sent flying. Asia, who sat in the wings, went after the girl and healed her, but just seeing what happened hurt. She wanted to fight, she wanted to protect her family. How long would she have to wait here? Boost. Oh okay. Issei gasped for breath. That should do it, T30 boosts. Sorry it took so long. Issei had probably never used the boosted gear to boost someone else's power this many times, especially since Rias had been keeping track of everyone's progress, and she knew that the most Issei could use on himself right now was 20. Sweat poured from her pawn's forehead as he hunched his shoulders like he was carrying a world's worth of weight. His face was slightly red. She didn't think it was from being in close proximity to her, he'd really strained himself. Thank you, Eyes, Rias said. Please rest now. Leave the rest up to me. All right. Rias could feel the power flowing through her, coursing through her body like an undeniable, raging torrent. She wasn't sure if she could adequately describe it. Rias felt like she could take on the entire world by herself. She wondered if this was what Circex felt like every day. Revel, Rias said into her communicator. I'm ready. Okay. Everyone, clear out. Rias is going to take on Circex now. Rias took a deep breath. Breathe in. Hold it. Breathe out. She prepared herself both mentally and physically for what she was about to do. Attempt a feat which she had never done before. Attempt to condense the powers of destruction into herself like her brother could do. It was far harder than she imagined it to be. The powers of destruction were an uncontrollable disaster, annihilation in its purest form. Trying to condense those powers was like trying to stop a star from going supernova. Sweat broke out on her forehead as she struggled to control her powers. Her body shook as the strain caused lightning to course through her. It hurt. However, she struggled on, pushing her mind and body past their limits to do what she had seen her brother do only a few times in her entire life. She succeeded. Human-shaped aura of destruction. Her brother's ultimate technique. His magnum opus. The ability to convert oneself into the powers of destruction that destroyed everything regardless of the will. It felt weird. It was like her body was there, but she had no mass, no weight. She supposed that was because her body was now composed entirely of energy. Rias tried to breathe out, discovered that, for whatever reason, she couldn't draw breath, and then decided to just go for broke. It took less than a second to reach Searsex. It was like she had teleported. Rias didn't waste any time. The moment she was before her brother, she slammed into him with a right hook that made him go flying backward with a loud sonic boom as he broke the sound barrier.
The mountain behind him was destroyed. Completely. The entire Mount Olympus, which stood at an elevation of 2,918 meters, exploded in a violent spray of dirt and rocks. It was as if someone had buried a nuclear bomb deep beneath the mountain and then set it off. Everyone else shielded their eyes as they struggled to remain where they were, but Rias did not. She floated where she was, her body leaking powers of destruction, which annihilated everything that tried to touch her.
Searsex wouldn't die from just that. And she was right. Not even a second later, she felt an immense surge of power, and seconds after that, Searsex, his body now transformed into the human-shaped aura of destruction, came at her. Rias met him head-on. Their clash caused the very air to explode as powers of destruction met powers of destruction. Rias was not used to fighting hand-to-hand, but she had been practicing every day that she could with Naruto and the others. While she was a king, and a king's job was to remain in the back and guide her peerage to victory, she didn't want to be incapable of protecting her friends when the need came. It was why she'd done her best to learn how to fight barehanded. Her powers, boosted by the boosted gear, allowed her to keep fighting against her brother. Their powers leaked out of their bodies, incapable of being fully contained, and began destroying the surrounding area. The ground beneath them slowly ground away as though it was evaporating, forming a large crater that grew larger with time. Every attack and counterattack caused the area around them to explode. Throughout it all, Rias realized something. She was not as powerful as Searsex. Even when she was using human-shaped aura of destruction, Rias did not have Searsex's power. She might have been able to keep up with him in the beginning, but the longer the fight went on, the less energy she had. Her reserves of demonic power were rapidly dwindling. Meanwhile, Searsex was still going strong. Rias, Searsex said suddenly. It seems you've become ridiculously strong in the time I've been away. Rias faltered. Searsex? Brother? Searsex pulled back. The aura surrounding him disappeared. Searsex, now back in his normal human form, grinned at her. I have to thank you. If you hadn't begun using the powers of destruction like that, I wouldn't have been able to break free of that mind control device. Rias was so shocked that all the power she had gained from the boosted gear evaporated. She transformed back into her normal self. Her body felt heavier than she was used to. But, how? Still grinning, Searsex pointed at his neck, where the control collar had been wrapped around. It wasn't there anymore. It's thanks to you. When you used the powers of destruction, my body recognized you as a major threat and used it as well. When I transformed into my true form, the collar was destroyed. He scratched the back of his neck and blushed. I apologize for continuing to fight, but you had become so strong that I wanted to test how powerful you've become myself. Oh, she wanted to be mad at her brother, but she wasn't. She was kind of tired. Everything was spinning, and the world appeared out of focus. Whoa! Rias felt, more than saw, her body leaning against someone else's. It was probably Searsex, but she couldn't tell. She was too tired to lift her head. I guess you're not used to using the powers of destruction like that, Searsex said in her ear. Once we get home, I'll train you. Rias would have told him that she was only able to transform like that because Issei had boosted her powers, but she was too tired. A shockwave suddenly rippled through the air. That aura, is that Naruto? Searsex asked. Probably, Riza said. Holy shit. I knew he was powerful, but I didn't know he was that powerful. And wait. Why the hell is he taking on the Greek pantheon by himself? Rias was too tired to answer, but, even with her head leaning down, her lips still quirked upward into an amused smirk.
Devil Ninja. Naruto wore a fierce snarl as he slammed a Rasengan into some guy's face. He had learned a few seconds ago that this guy's name was Poseidon. As the man went flying so far that all Naruto saw of him was a large splash as he crashed into the sea, Naruto turned away to block several arrows being shot from a bow. He knocked them aside with his hands, but then he was hit in the chest with a lightning bolt.
Grimacing as the bolt tried to penetrate his stomach, Naruto exerted more influence over Kurama's chakra and used the truth-seeking ball, transformed into a sword, to slice the thing in half. Then he sent 5 more truth-seeking balls at the one who sent the lightning bolt, Zeus, who created blades made of lightning to swat them away. Sadly for Zeus, Naruto could control where they went. The balls curved around him and impaled his back, though they didn't do more than break the skin. Damn these gods and their ridiculous durability. The hell is this guy made of? Naruto had no time to contemplate that as someone with teleporting abilities like his father appeared before him. Being used to high-speed battles, Naruto was able to block all of his punches and kicks, but this blonde dude was clearly a distraction. The woman with the bow and arrows was lining up a shot behind him. "You're pretty good," Naruto said. The man grinned. It was bright and sunny, kinda like his own. "Thanks," he said before vanishing. Naruto spun around as the air behind him whistled and punched the arrow aimed at his back. The arrow exploded, launching him backward, toward the waiting first of the vanilla-haired woman, Hera, whose bright smile made him understand that she was going to enjoy this. "Don't think poorly of me, child," she said before trying to deck him in the face. Naruto disappeared before she could. He reappeared behind her and struck her with a double heel kick to the shoulder blades. Fuuten. Suin Rasen Shuriken. Naruto created a Rasen Shuriken in each hand and lobbed them at 2 of the pair of gods that came at him from the front. Zeus and the blonde man had clearly learned their lesson from last time. They dodged, though it didn't stop the blonde one, Apollo, from getting sucked into his attack, which exploded the moment he touched one of the blades, creating a giant sphere of compressed wind blades that cut into the man. Zeus avoided it by destroying the Rasen Shuriken with a lightning bolt. Naruto cursed. "Naruto, what is it? I'm kinda busy." Naruto flew above another lightning bolt that Zeus sent his way. He frowned when his feet tingled with electric jolts. His cloak should have protected him from that. "You're running out of chakra." "What do you mean? Like, I'm running out?" "No, your chakra is being siphoned off, your reserves are shrinking." "They're what?" Naruto was so shocked by what Kurama had said that he couldn't avoid the punch from Hera. A loud crack rang across the battlefield, which Naruto could have sworn were his ribs breaking. The world around him suddenly blurred as his lungs were deprived of oxygen. Pain struck him before he could even blink, and when he came to, he was lying in a crater and Kurama was shouting nonsense. "I don't know what's happening, but your chakra reserves are growing smaller. It's different from someone stealing your chakra. It's like the amount that you have at your disposal is shrinking." How is that possible?" Naruto groaned as he stood to his feet. His chakra cloak was flickering. He swayed as he stood, blood dripping down his face. It took him a moment to notice the stinging sensation in his left arm, but he absently realized that his arm had been twisted the wrong way. "I don't know, however, I know the source. It's Sage Mode." "Sage Mode? I noticed it when you started fighting. Your chakra began shrinking. I thought it was just the natural chakra you lost while using chakra extensive techniques, but that's not it. Your chakra pool is actually decreasing. I have no idea how this is possible." "I see, so the more I use Sage Mode, the smaller my chakra becomes."
Yes. Naruto frowned. He didn't understand how this was possible, but he was beginning to suspect that something had happened when he was thrown into this world that was causing these problems, or perhaps his mere existence was something that this world couldn't accommodate for. He didn't know. It wasn't like he had knowledge on interdimensional travel. This was also different from Kagaya's ability to create her own dimensions. Either way, Naruto was in a pickle. He was losing chakra. No, his capacity was shrinking. This meant that, eventually, he'd no longer be useful so long as he kept using Sage Mode. Damn. What should he do? "It looks like you are running low on power," Zeus said, landing in front of Naruto with the 9 other Greek gods that he'd been locked in combat with for who knew how long. "I still have enough left to kick your ass," Naruto snarked. "Arrogant prick, calm down, dear," Hera said, raising a hand. "It's clear that he can no longer fight. He's just goading you." Zeus growled but said nothing. "What should we do now?" asked Poseidon. "Obviously, we should kill him," Zeus said. "But is that the right thing to do?" asked Apollo, the blonde man. "I mean, he's just trying to protect his comrades."
How does that excuse his actions, or their actions, for that matter? I believe we may have been hasty, another woman said, a beautiful lady with silver hair. He didn't know her name, but he'd seen her hanging in the back. Naruto could only assume she was their strategist. We did not listen to this child when he told us his reasons for defending his leaders, but I think what he has to say affects us as well. We should hear him out. Don't mask your intentions behind such a blatant lie, Zeus grumbled. This was the outcome you were hoping for all along, isn't it, Athena? I'll not deny that I was not thrilled by the idea of fighting an unknown opponent without knowing why, Athena admitted. In war, information is more important than brute strength. So says you, a scarred man said. I am a goddess of war, Eris, Athena said calmly. We don't know anything about what is happening or why. I'd like to know whether or not the people before me are truly our enemies. It seems more to me like they are simply pawns being played with by a chess master. Don't try to act intelligent with me, cunt. All of you calm down, Hera shouted, silencing everyone. We have company. At that moment, Sears, Michael, and all of the three factions' alliance leaders, along with Rias and the others who'd gone to rescue them, descended from the sky. Sears and Michael stood at the front, but Azazel, Gabrielle, Shemazai, and Seraphal were right behind them. As one, all six leaders bowed deeply. I apologize for the inconvenience we've caused you, Sears spoke for all of them. Please do not blame Naruto for what happened. It was our carelessness that led to this situation. Perhaps you should tell us what is going on, Hera suggested, suddenly calm and placid. Naruto looked at Zeus, who stood behind the woman. Of course, Sears replied. We'll tell you everything that you want to know. As the three factions' leaders spoke with the Greek pantheon, Naruto finally allowed himself to slump back in relief. It looked like this battle was over. Fuck, he was so tired. Devil Ninja, 2 days had passed. All of the devils, angels, and fallen angels that Rias and the others had convinced to help them in their mission had returned to the underworld. Meanwhile, the Gremory and Sona peerages had gone back to Kuo. Several meetings had taken place between the three factions and the Greek pantheon, though neither Naruto nor Rias were privy to what happened behind closed doors. That said, Sears had promised to inform them of what happened when negotiations concluded. Naruto was sitting in the occult research club room. Classes had ended. It was back to business as usual. Naruto was working on his homework. It was math. Naruto hated math, and school, and anything that involved learning useless crap that he would never use. He still didn't even know why he needed to know about Pythagoreans and ossicles and what have you. This would not do him any good in real life. Still, he was in school, and Rias wanted him to do well, so he had to do it. He was the only one there at the moment. The other members of Rias's peerage were out on the job. That meant he was pretty much alone. As he was trying to learn about quadratic equations, the door to the clubroom opened and Roswise stepped inside. Roswise, Naruto greeted. What's up? I was just wondering if Master Rias was in, Roswise said. Master, ah. Yes, I didn't tell you, did I? Said Roswise. I've become a member of Rias's peerage. You have? Yes. I was reluctant at first, but Rias convinced me after she mentioned all of the great benefits that comes with being a devil under her peerage. I'm really looking forward to the excellent pay and full coverage. I'll be able to buy a lot from this 100 yen store that I found the other day. Naruto wasn't really surprised that Roswise had become a member of Rias's peerage, but he was shocked that it had happened so soon. Still, he thought it would be good for her. It was like a new lease on life. I'm happy for you. I know you'll fit in with us. Thank you. Roswise smiled, though that smile quickly left and was replaced with a frown. I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to ask, where is Ophis?
Ah. Naruto gave her a strained smile. Ophis is busy.
Roswise tilted her head. Busy? Very busy, Naruto confirmed with a serious nod. Devil Ninja. Ophis frowned as she stepped out of a vortex of her own creation. The ability to travel through dimensions at will was one that only she and Great Red possessed. Well, there might have been a few others who could do the same thing, but they couldn't enter another dimension so easily, especially not one belonging to a different pantheon. The area that she appeared around was definitely Asgard, but it looked like a major battle had taken place there. Everything was destroyed. The buildings were wrecked, the mountains were gone, and there was a giant crater in the ground that must have been at least 100 meters deep. Ophis walked up to the lip of the crater. It was perfectly smooth. That must have been Searsex's powers of destruction at work. This is an unexpected surprise, a voice said above her. It was Loki. Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, to what do I owe the honor of your visit? Loki wasn't the only one present. There were several dozen people surrounding her, gods and goddesses of the Norse pantheon. All of them were bearing weapons, hammers and knives and swords and staves, which were clearly pointed at her with hostile intent. Ophis did not respond with words, for words were useless and not the reason she was there. If she wanted to exchange words with someone, then she would talk to Naruto and his friends. She actually liked them. Her first attack was launched at a man with red hair, a beard, and a hammer. It was aimed at the device on his neck, which was destroyed. Sadly, her attack was still powerful enough that he was sent soaring into a mountain wall several dozen kilometers away. Ophis ignored him. The attack on the red one seemed to be the signal for the others to attack, for they came at her en masse, attacking from every conceivable direction and angle. Such an attack would have overwhelmed anyone else. No one else could have survived such a situation. But she was not just anyone. Ophis unleashed her power, an explosion of energy that forced everyone away from her, sending them all sailing through the sky like ragdolls. Ophis then launched her snakes at everyone present. Each snake latched onto someone, biting the device on their necks and injecting heat powers into them, destroying them with ease. All of the gods and goddesses around her were unconscious now. They must have been under that control device for a long time. The device put a huge mental strain on people because it forced their mind into submission and made them obey the will of the person who the device was attuned to. Ophis didn't really know how the device worked, exactly, but everything she knew, she had learned from Naruto, who also didn't know everything about them. He did say something about nature chakra, but Ophis didn't know much about nature chakra either. I see now why people call you the Ouroboros dragon and the Infinity Dragon God. Your powers truly are extraordinary. Loki paused before extending a hand toward her. Why don't you join me? I could use the help of someone with your power. Ophis didn't even need a second to answer that question. She launched a massive column of black energy at Loki, who evaded the attack. She frowned. It looked like she would have to use something stronger. Come now, Ophis, Loki began, can't we be civilized about this? I have nothing to say to you, Ophis said. She sent another blast of power at Loki, who, again, evaded the attack with ease. That's a pity, Loki said. Having the Ouroboros dragon on my side would have made reaching my goals easier. Don't care. Loki was definitely a slippery opponent. She had been firing her attacks almost non-stop now, but he was still evading every attack that came at him. Ophis could have used a more powerful attack, but that would have meant destroying Asgard, which would have also meant killing everyone there. In most circumstances, Ophis wouldn't have cared about something like who she killed, but she knew that Naruto didn't want any unnecessary bloodshed. It looked like she would have to get creative. She sighed, how bothersome. Because she was sending a constant stream of deadly attacks his way, Loki had no time to counter her, busy as he was dodging every barrage of black energy that she sent at him. She kept him busy with that. Meanwhile, she discreetly sent several snakes into the ground, which she had crawl beneath the surface. Once she had positioned them where she wanted them, Ophis began herding Loki toward her snakes. Loki didn't seem to realize what he was doing. His face was suffused with red as he scrunched it up in concentration. He was probably getting frustrated by his inability to counterattack. She sent several beams over his head, which came so close to hitting him that they grazed his hair. Ophis frowned. He was too quick for her slow attacks to hit. She could have probably taken him out in hand-to-hand combat, but she didn't actually know how to fight barehanded. Perhaps she should ask Naruto to teach her when she returned home. Home, even as she continued attacking, the thought that entered her mind surprised her. She was beginning to think of Naruto's home as her home. No, it was more like, wherever Naruto was, that was her home. How odd. When had she begun to truly think of that boy's lap as the place where she belonged? Ophis realized that she was losing focus. Shaking her head, she turned her attention back to Loki, forcing him to the ground with a barrage of long-range firepower. Oddly, her attacks weren't spells. Ophis didn't know any true magic. She was just releasing her power in short bursts. Lower and lower Loki went, until, finally, his feet touched the ground. That was when Ophis had her snakes leap out from the ground and attack, sinking their fangs into Loki's thighs, calves, butt, and torso. The Asgardian screamed in surprise and pain. He struggled to pry them off, but the snakes were already doing damage. What is going on? What is this? Loki screamed as his body expanded like a balloon. You wanted power, didn't you? Asked Ophis. That's why I've decided to give you power. No. Loki screamed as his body continued swelling. His cheeks were now round and puffy. They reminded Ophis of a Jigglypuff. I didn't mean it like this. I don't want power like this. No, no. Cracks started appearing on Loki's body, spreading quickly as Ophis's power overwhelmed him. When Ophis gave people power, she normally only gave them a single snake, the reason being that a person, whether they were god or devil or human, could only hold one snake's worth of power without, well, exploding. Loki had 12 snakes latched onto him, and all of those snakes were injecting her energy into him. It was too much power for even a god to take. With one final wail of despair, Loki, trickster god of Norse mythology, exploded in a violent spray of energy. Ophis remained where she was as the explosion swept over her. A barrier appeared in front of her, protecting her vision as a shock wave rushed over the land, destroying everything in its wake. She didn't hesitate to place the gods and goddesses who'd been rendered unconscious under her protection, containing them within a bubble that kept them safe from her power. Sadly, Asgard was not so lucky. Ophis frowned as cracks appeared above her, tears in the dimension. Had she used too much power? Perhaps she should have only used 2 or 3 snakes. Well, it was too late to worry about that now. These Asgardians might be upset that their dimension was destroyed, but really, it was their fault for letting themselves get caught in Loki's trap. With a loud sound like thunder striking the ground, the dimension of Asgard was destroyed, and the swirling nebula of the void greeted them. All of the Asgardians were still safely ensconced in her protective bubbles. They would not die from being exposed to the void. Nodding to herself, Ophis began moving, pulling the group of gods and goddesses along behind her. It was time to return home. It was time to go back to Naruto. After what she had done for him, he had better give her lots of head petting. This arc has finally ended. I meant to upload this yesterday, but I was so busy I forgot. I'm sorry. A few things before I go. First, I'm sure everyone's curious about Naruto's power problems. I won't tell you outright what's wrong with Naruto, but there are several factors involved in his issue. Sage Mode, the laws that govern the DxD universe, and the mysterious figure who's secretly leading the Chaos Brigade. I'm sure some of you have already figured out who this leader is, so you can probably make a guess as to what is happening. The rest of you will just have to be patient. I know no one likes a nerfed Naruto, but I have legitimate reasons for his problems. The last announcement I want to make is that I've got several new books out. I always let you guys know in case anyone who feels like reading my original stuff can grab a copy. If you're interested, my books are easily acquired through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. A Fox's Love, A Fox's Tale, A Fox's Maid, A Fox's Family. A Fox's Vacation, A Fox's Mate, not exactly a triumphant return home. Kevin and Lillian, along with their family and friends, return home after their disastrous spring break vacation. Kevin tries to come to terms with the not-so-shocking knowledge that the yokai world isn't all humor and tropes. While Kevin is dealing with this newfound knowledge and the loss of his innocence, life returns to normal. What passes for normality when living with a family of kitsune? But when lightning strikes, it likes to strike twice. Too bad for Kevin. The world of yokai is the same way. He and Lillian will soon learn that the yokai world isn't prepared to let them go just because they want to live the life of normal high school students. Arcadia's Ignoble Knight. Arcadia's Knight Academy is the premier school for young men hoping to become a sorceress's knight. Only nobles, people with power and prestige, are allowed within these hallowed grounds. Which explains why Caspian Ignis del Sol is hated by everyone. He's not a noble, or of even slightly noble lineage. As payment for being enrolled in the academy, Caspian is sometimes given tasks to perform that take him outside of the academy walls. This time, his job is to deliver a letter to a sorceress living in Ashdown, but when the train that he's riding on is attacked by a mysterious band of thugs in cloaks, he'll find that there is a whole lot more to this quest than he first imagined.